Ho, ho, Merry Christmas. All right, you guys. So Jeff, as I got in here, he saw me. He goes, all you gotta do is diet gray and gain some weight, and it's the perfect season. I don't even have to diet gray. I actually have to just shave this part off because my wife dyed it dark, right? So this is the gray. It's really good to see you, my friend.
It's good to
Jeff.
see you too. I'm glad to be back in studio with you here.
Yeah, let's I still have this other thing up here. I love money. This all right. Well, we have a ton to talk about. First of all, how was the trip to Antarctica?
It went really well. We got I mean, just if I'm honest, there's part of why I wanted to go to Antarctica is because I want to get all 7 continents, and so now I can go up and talk about. Yeah, I've been to 6 continents, and I haven't been to the obvious one. Africa is the only one I haven't been to yet. So that was part of it. But I mean, the scenery is just spectacular down there. But it's also kind of a stark and barren world because the time you're down there, I saw 3 kinds of life. I saw humans, I saw seals, and I saw a couple of birds. And it's just like there's no trees, there's no plants, there's no moss, nothing green out in nature. And so it's really kind of a bizarre world. But we got a lot of work done on our instrument, and hopefully within the next couple of weeks we'll get to launch it here.
Huh. Hold on, I've got a technical issue happening here. You can still see me, right?
You will, yes.
What is going reload? Oh, my email. Sorry. My email was doing something that was overwriting the screen. I'm back. Okay. Sorry, you said you saw human life, the 3 types of life you saw while you were down there?
We saw humans, seals, and a couple of birds. And I do have to say I was a little disappointed. I was hoping to see penguins, but apparently penguins like open water, and the sea ice was still all there. So we're still, to get from where we are to open water is miles, hundreds or tens of miles at least. So there were no penguins, at least not that I saw. So a little bummed about that, but oh well, life goes on.
So the balloon went up, data was received.
No, we're hoping to launch within the next few weeks here. I think somewhere next week is when we're kind of preliminarily scheduled to. The weather will be right because the polar vortex has to set in so that it goes around in circles, and so you kind of have to wait on nature a little bit to do that. But
got it.
Exciting time. So
you were there to set stuff up to get the instrumentation.
Working on that,
yeah. Got it. So you don't have to go back. Your work there is done
for this year. Yes, I mean there are people there who are there till January, February. There are people who are coming down, people who came earlier. It's pretty big project to work on. Also, or the physical scale of it is pretty large, and so it's fun to see it all come together and start to take shape.
Got it. Well, all right. So let's transition to the topic.
All right.
I got an astrophysicist friend. Let's see if he knows what the heck this means.
I gotta say, I was a little like, okay, what's gonna go on with this title, and where are we going here? So I'm a little apprehensive today, if I'm honest.
I'm putting the ball in your court. I'm putting you on the spot.
Okay.
What the heck? You're the star guy, right? You know what stars are. You know everything there is to know about stars, I would assume.
But well, I know more than the average person, but there's a whole lot to know about stars.
True. I, more than the average person. I shouldn't say everything. Yeah. What does it mean? Do stars align?
Well, I mean, at a very trivial level, yes. I mean, you look out along any line of sight, and there are going to be actually a number of stars along that. In fact, that was one of the early arguments that the universe wasn't infinite, is that if the universe is infinite, what that would mean is that no matter what direction you're looking, if it was infinitely old and infinitely large, no matter what direction you're looking, at some point that line of sight is going to terminate in a star. So it will be right there. And the fact that the sky is dark at night says that can't be going on. So yes, stars do align, and it's a measure of how close do you want them to be. But I mean, anytime you're looking through a galaxy, you're going to see lots of stars that are lined up.
So is there anything special about stars aligning that makes that a phrase from an astrophysical sense?
Well, I think what that probably has, that phrase I would guess has its roots in astrology and
Um,
horoscopes and those sorts of things. You know, if the stars line up this way, what I find interesting about that is that, at least from a scientific perspective, it may be that stars line up or stars have a certain configuration in the sky. Be that as it may, given that stars are so far away, those stars have no measurable influence on what goes on here on Earth. I would say no influence at all, but we can actually, in potential can measure the gravity. The fact that we see the light means that they have some small impact here, but I can't emphasize how small that impact is. So if you want to talk about what actually influences what goes on here on Earth, that's the sun, that's the moon, planets a little bit, just Earth itself. And once you've gotten through that list, there's virtually nothing else that exhibits any sort of influence on what goes on in life here, at least physically, from a physical perspective and the physical universe.
okay, right. So the physical definition, right? The meaning that if we're taking a physical meaning of the word stars aligning, doesn't have an impact, but then that's in the physical sense.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's human perception, right? And so the physical stars aligning, I think, this is my speculation on where that. I agree. It must be astrology, not astronomy, right? Astrology, where this term has expression has come into meaning. Looking up at the stars and seeing a shape, right, that reflects something you're familiar with, right? The astrological signs or the zodiac, right?
Yep.
It's like, oh, these ones are bright, and if I trace them, it looks like something, right? So they're aligning in a sense to represent a pattern that looks familiar to us or to
Yeah.
the person who comes up with it, right? I mean, there's so many stars out there. I guess technically you could make any kind of shape of anything if you just connect the
Well,
dots.
that's the funny thing. I mean, you look out there, and my wife and I notice Orion for various historical reasons, and you look out there, and it's like, oh, that's a hunter. Okay, I mean, it's four bright stars in the corner.
Yeah,
There's three kind of going across the middle, maybe one up at the top. It looks more like an hourglass more than anything.
right,
So
right.
there's a little bit of creativity in what we assign to these as actually being people. But
Yeah, yeah.
I
Fill in
think
the gaps with your imagination. Yeah,
exactly. I think it's
yeah,
probably right. You could probably find most any sort of shape up there, or at least a lot of them. I guess if you get very, very complicated or technical, that may not be there. But that's actually one of the scenes out of A Beautiful Mind. Is he says, "Hey, find me this shape," and he looks over, and it's like, "Oh, there's one over there." And I find lots of things like that in the sky. There's ice cream cones. There's teapots.
yeah, yeah.
Call it what you want, but there's lots. Our mind will fill in a lot of gaps there when it's really just a couple of points.
Yeah. It is interesting though. After and like growing up in you know the the government schools, so the education that we have, having seen some of the patterns. I've never really been into astrology or read horoscopes or anything like that, but seeing what traditionally has been the zodiac,
Mm-hmm.
it is the three stars in the belt of Orion, right? There's an alignment of those three stars that catches my eye right away, right? It's like,
Right.
okay, I recognize that one. And then the Big Dipper or the Little Dipper, the Dipper, like it's like, oh, I recognize that configuration wherever I see
Yeah.
that, right? It's like immediately identifiable, and they're aligned in a certain configuration.
Right.
All right, well, so in a physical sense, this notion of the stars aligning have no physical effect.
Mm-hmm.
So let's transition to the other meaning, maybe
Which
maybe
is
less comfortable for you, Jeff.
okay.
What does it mean when people say the stars align?
I don't know what people mean, but when I hear that phrase, the stars align, what I usually think of is that whatever path I'm on is smooth. And I don't know why the stars aligning makes my path smooth, but I have recognized in my work, whether that's at home or at work, when I'm doing something, I'll sit down and generally part of my process is, okay, what are the steps and how long is it going to take to do this? And I've found a pretty good indicator is to go what I think it's going to take and then multiply by 3. And more times than not, it works in there. Occasionally, it takes what I think it, my first map, and where that happens, everything seems to fall into place. When I do this, it actually works. I don't have to solve any problems. And so when I hear the stars align, it's more akin to that. Everything just worked right when I went through it. There were no problems to solve. What that has to do with the stars aligning, I don't know, but that's the phrase. When the phrase "the stars align" comes to mind, that's what I think of. I don't know. I'm curious what you think when you hear it.
Well, I think it is that carryover from astrology that apparently the stars aligning a certain way means something good for a person born in the zodiac or something, right? It's like if the stars are aligning, good things are coming to you, the person
Right.
for whom the stars have aligned, or whatever. But yeah, I guess so. The phrase is used. Here's the reason I picked this. Not only is because you're a star guy, right? I stuck to the star guys. Throw him a curveball here.
Well, but do any of these stars align? Because it's a different star background today, if you hadn't noticed. So.
Yeah, no, I don't see any familiar patterns.
Okay, all
right. If you got out of the way, I might, but I don't recognize any. So I hear that when I hear the phrase "the stars align," it's a paraphrase for other phrases that we use also sometimes, like coincidence or kismet or providence.
Okay.
Right. We use these kind of words to explain the unexplainable. It feels like something's going on, is going on right, or something is going good, or something is going well in my life, where there's this point that happened, and then this point that happened, and they happened in such a sequence that it's like, oh, if they hadn't happened in that sequence, then things wouldn't have gone as well for me as they did, right? So it's like when you're tracking events in your life, the stars aligning. Oh, what a coincidence that happened right now. It's a good thing. Or kismet is I guess it's Arabic. Kismet, I've heard that a lot. So it's that same kind of concept. Kismet, it's the universe is smiling on you. The stars aligning, providence.
Well, so I mean, if is what you're getting at, I remember, when I moved to California is an incredibly expensive place to live, but I had to move over to the West Side, and that's an even more expensive place to live. And I remember when we were going through and purchasing, we bought a house and we sold the house, and then we moved into a condo, and we're like, you're kind of just praying God to show us where to live and how to do that. And what was interesting is that the amount we profited when we sold the house was the exact amount of the down payment I needed. I mean, down to the hundreds of dollars, which considering this was far more than hundreds of dollars is that the sort of stuff you're talking about where the stars aligning? Okay. So that's, because I did look at that as God saying, hey, I've got you. This is the direction I want you to be going here.
Yes, we're getting to exactly like the sense that I was, thinking. It's like when God gives us glimpses of His hand at work in our lives, right? His hand at work generally all the time, but in our lives specifically. If we're pursuing God, we love God. Our hearts are in His hands. The desire of our heart, God has given us the desire of our hearts, and we're pursuing good, and then He shows us that we're in His will by things that line up, like what you're saying. That's why I threw out the word coincidence, because it's a fake word, right? It's a word that an unbeliever uses to try and explain something inexplicable, but they recognize, right? They recognize something's going on, and they just, I don't know. I don't believe in those kinds of things, so it's a coincidence. It's a filler word for an unknown. But
that's interesting, because if I get what you're saying, I mean, there are things that are just coincidence. The fact that I flip a coin 5 times and I get 5 heads in a row. If I do that enough, it just is going to happen. I can't put any put a whole lot of meaning on it. But if I get what you're saying in there, there's this sense where even whether believer or unbeliever, they recognize something seems odd about this. This seems unusually good or unusually bad, if you will. And this is what you're getting at, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I when producer Gina asked, "What's the topic for today?" I just literally just thought for a couple seconds, and I'm like, what's a good thing? And the reason it makes sense is like the stars are aligning for me, my friend. Good things are happening, like the progress on the project.
Oh, nice. That's good to hear.
Yeah, because I'm dealing with all types of people, right? I'm dealing with Christians, non-Christians, Muslims, atheists. I'm dealing with, Republican MAGA, and I'm dealing with leftist, social justice warrior types. I'm dealing with Turks, and I'm dealing with Armenians, and I'm dealing with all different types, and every one of them that I talk to about this project get it and engage, and it's like our coming. So I've had a series of meetings in the past couple weeks. Like I met with some money people, and I met with some production people, and I met with some historians. Yesterday I was at UCLA. I was in your stomping grounds. I'm like, wait, where's the science building? Where's Jeff's laboratory at? I was there meeting a Turkish professor, like one of them, like those who are familiar with Armenian genocide studies. When you think of, well, who's the most authoritative Turk that talks about the facts, the truth of the Armenian genocide? Taner Akçam. Okay. And I was meeting with him yesterday, and
nice.
Just real quick about that. Another UCLA, she's a PhD candidate, but is also a professor. She's taught there and is almost done with her. She finished her doctoral exams and has to finish the dissertation, etc. So she is Armenian and he is Turk, and we met together in his office. And I met him a couple of at a book signing that he did like 6 years ago, and then I met him at another event, just connected. But this was, I didn't realize he was local. I didn't realize he was at UCLA, and half an hour from my office, and I'm like, set it up, and like I was very taken with this project. It's funny because I go in there and, I'm the expert on Soghomon Tehlirian, and most people I talk to, even historians that I talk to, don't know the details that I know about this particular character, this particular period. So I always have to ask certain questions. Do you know this? Do you know that? Just so I know where I'm gauging. And so with him, I go kind of the more obscure. I'm like, do you know who Max von Scheubner Richter is? He goes, I'm a historian. That was wonderful. Like I over the course of, because it's such a habit for me. To stop down and say, do you know this? Do you know that? And then give a little bit background if it's important in the story that I'm telling. And with him, I did it 2 or 3 times, and he was like, I'm a historian. And then I go, Star Wars, Luke Skywalker goes, oh yeah, that stuff, I don't know any of that. He's like, I can't help you there. But so it was just when you talk to somebody who knows the minutia and the details, where it's shorthand, I don't have to explain all this background. The conversation just goes, it just accelerates. And I can tell he and the other historian who's sitting, and it's like I can only envision him, not knowing anything about me until this moment, and hearing this total outsider, non-historian, just a Hollywood guy, getting into the weeds in his domain. I can only imagine how exhilarating that must be for him. And, he's a historian, so he's not showing it, but it was demonstrated by some of the things he said and some of the things that came after that I made an incredible positive impression on the guy. So after the meeting, he emails both of us later on in the group text. He's like, I want to invite you to my home. My wife wants to hear more about this story. I want to continue a conversation. And I'm like, oh, thank you, Lord. And this guy's not a believer. He's, I always start with, like, the inevitable question is, how did you come to this? How did this interest you? And I'm like, I'm a Christian. This is the first Christian nation, right? It's like, that's that logical connection to me to this historic moment.
Yes.
It's acknowledged by you, Mr. Atheist Turkish historian, that there's such a thing as a first Christian nation, right? That's a significant, from my theological understanding, that's something God planned from the foundations of the earth, right?
Okay.
It's always been God's plan that there would be a first Christian nation, and that first Christian nation would be Armenia, and that would be a milestone in history, and that subsequent nations would convert to Christianity. And certainly enough, 13 years later, the entire Roman Empire declares, Christianity. But so I always, it doesn't matter who I'm talking to. That's my testimony. Why did you come to this? I prayed and asked God, right? That's my, I prayed, God, you brought me to Hollywood. Why am I here? There must be something more important for me to do than just to work for these other people and make them money and do their stuff. Why am I here? And a month after that prayer, I learned about Solomon Tehlirian. 2 months later, I'm sitting across from his son. And that these moments and in that yesterday in that meeting, when I'm getting to this point in the story and I'm pulling out the memoir, the other historian that's with me, she goes, did you bring the book? Did you bring the book? She's actually a rare book specialist.
Oh, wow.
That's why she's, an important person in this sphere. Like, she specializes in rare books. So when she sees this book, she's like, and she's Armenian, so she can actually read it. And she's like, this is a one-off. And she's like, did you bring the book? And so I show him the book and everything. And I'm telling him some of the history of dealing with the family and dealing with some opposition, right? So there are other people out there that are opposed to what I'm doing, other Armenians, believe it or not the Turkish government. They haven't caught wind of me yet, but you'd think it's the Turkish government that'll be the opposition to what I'm doing. But sorry, I was reading the comments here. So when I'm telling him about some of the opposition to the memoir and getting it published, and I'm like, there's this other guy who is opposing and publishing it on his own, and he knows this guy, he knows the other publisher, and he was asking me about that specifically. And I go, they were claiming it was public domain, et cetera, et cetera. And when I said that, he goes, it's not, because he's gone through the same procedure with another memoir of another historic character. He's been through it all. He goes, nope, he lays out. So he's already, like, these are corroborations and confirmations of things that I've been going through. So all of this to say, the stars are aligning. I'm here with good news.
No, that's awesome to hear. I've enjoyed walking through this journey and hearing bits and pieces as you've gone through, but it's been a pretty long journey. I mean, I would bet 6, 7, 8 years at this point in time, correct?
This is the October was the beginning of the 8th year.
8th year, okay.
7 years completed. Yes.
So it's interesting because I remember my recollection when you first started engaging this is there were a lot of stars aligning moments, and then COVID hit, and there's a lot of stars not aligning moments. How's that played out? I mean, it's got to be encouraging to see the stars aligning, if you will, again here, but you got to wrestle with that a little bit. It's
good question. So when we're in the middle of something, plugging away at something, we're not, we are in the mire, we're in the minutia, and not able to always step back and look at what's the bigger picture of what's going on. So yes, I had finished the first draft of the script, and a month later, international travel is shut down for the first time in human history. Right? Like, right. I'm like, first draft done, time to start talking to producers and get this show on the road. It's a movie. We're going to start producing it, blah, blah, blah. Literally, it was like, finish the first draft. Now let's get to work. And then Hollywood shuts down. Like, so like you're saying, like, well, stars didn't align. But that actually now in retrospect is also a part of the stars aligning. If the shutdown didn't happen, and I was forcing the issue, maybe it would have gone in some direction, but it wouldn't have become what it is now and what it's supposed to be, and the timing of world events right now. And this is the easiest thing to pitch in the world right now. Syria,
Imagine, yeah.
if you're following, Syria is an upheaval, and part of the story takes place in Syria, right? The largest unmarked cemetery of dead Armenians is in Deir Zor, Syria, right?
Okay.
They marched the Armenians through the desert, and anybody who survived and didn't die in the desert died in Deir Zor. It's like 400 to 500,000 unmarked graves.
Wow.
So that's that.
So just some natural publicity for the film, just because of the events of the world going on today.
And the people that I'm pitching to are Armenians and Christians that, by this story coming to prominence, all eyes in the world look at that will be able to look at this conflict in the context of history and understand it the right way and be on the correct side of history out of it. Most Americans like Syria. I don't know if this is a good or a bad thing that's going on right now. I don't know. I really don't. Like, whose interest, blah, blah, blah. Russia, Turkey, Iran, Israel, United States, Syria, the terrorists, this and that. It's like, and thank God for this project has helped me see that part of the world. Anyway,
Yeah.
So getting back to the pandemic, even the pandemic, a lot of good came out of the lockdowns. I don't think we needed to lock down. Now, in retrospect, I think that was overreaction, but that, it showed some things that we need, like working from home. Certain brick and mortar buildings aren't actually necessary anymore because you realize, we can actually do what we do from our home office or whatever. But for me personally, it was a stop down, meditate, even in fetal position. God, what's going on? What am I supposed to do? Realizing it's too big for a movie. It's too big for 2 movies. It's too big for a trilogy. It's a long form, Netflix style 4-season series. It's like, to tell the story properly, you have to tell it that way. And I credit the pandemic lockdowns for forcing me to really dig in and meditate on what this thing is. So, the stars align.
Interesting part of that is that by having the lockdown, it's almost taught people how to engage media that way. It's, it used to be, big movie, we'd go out, watch one and be done. Now, most people watch, did you see this Netflix series? Did you
know who made more money through the lockdowns? Like Netflix, Amazon, all streaming services. Everybody started dumping money into their own streaming services because they saw this as the new gold mine. That's the case in point as well. So the stars have been aligning the whole time. It just accelerates the closer you get to a point, an inflection point. And it's like more and more stars seem to be aligning, but they've.
Sometimes the stars are uncomfortable for me, and I don't like that part of it. But no, to your point, I mean, the pandemic, I don't think I would characterize that as good or, oh, wow, this is the way things are supposed to be. But yet in the midst of that, God was working to bring about something bigger than what you could have thought about beforehand. And the discomfort in your mind or in your situation actually helped facilitate you growing. And it's interesting. I see that right now because I think I'm going through this period where God's saying, hey, let's just be uncomfortable for a while and learn how to be uncomfortable rather than having everything flow smoothly. And that's why you think we're all right. So
from the God's eye point of view is he's doing something. We're not doing something.
Yeah, exactly.
He's doing something.
That's a good point.
And we're lining, and these things we're lining up with what he's doing. Like, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as in heaven. And so we incline our hearts toward him, but we have partial understanding. We see through a glass darkly, but it gets clearer and clearer as we align more and more with what he's doing. And it's not up to him to explain the future. It's just up to us to obey.
So to take your metaphor, it's not so much that the stars are aligning and that impacts what's going on here. It's like as we move around to the right place, the stars line up the way God intended us to see them in the first place.
Yeah.
So they're already lined up. We're just not in the right place to see them properly. So.
And they've been lined up from eternity past, right? And it's like, hallelujah, it's glorious.
Yeah.
Jeff, good to see you, my friend.
It
to
is
see
good
you.
to see you too, Michael. Your beard and everything is it's clearly you've been working at this for a bit.
It's like the hair gets longer and wider down here. I'm like, oh, it frames the beard nicely. I'm like,
No, I enjoy talking. Like I said, I was a little apprehensive about what this topic, but I do think there's a point to where people see there's something more going on here. And as a Christian, it's like, yeah, of course that makes sense that there's something more. And it helps me. I really do see God's working in places where I originally thought, why is this hassle coming along? And later on, I was like, oh, that's what you were doing here.
and then you're like, thank God for that hassle
Exactly.
because
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Oh, love you, brother.
Love you too.
Have a good one. I'll see you. Maybe I need to come and see you in person and hang out with you for a bit before the next time. All right.
Got to do that.
We'll put something on the calendar. Love you. Bye.
Good day.